Well, what's new with me, everybody, is I have no voice.
Why? How did you lose it?
I had a wedding on Saturday night, and I'm like obviously just hoarse because like anytime you give a girl a couple drinks and play songs that I know the words to, I'm like screaming for 2 hours straight. So I had the best time, but sacrificed my voice for work today.
Not very professional of you, but I think we will all forgive you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Vibes FC. I'm Sam Mewis, coming to you from the Women's Game World Headquarters in Vermont.
And I'm Becky Sauerbrunn, coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Good Vibes FC is presented by our really great friends over at Olipop. Use code TWG20 for 20% off at drinkolipop.com. Today on the podcast, we're digging into the news that shook the soccer world last week, Alyssa Thompson's big move to Chelsea. We'll also get into some of the biggest storylines of the WSL this season, and then we have an email from Niti on the logistics of transfer moves. But first, Becky, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. There was just like so many sports on. The men's team played, NFL football, so much NWSL soccer, WSL. So I just was like in sports heaven.
Oh my gosh, sports mode.
We're still assembling furniture for the nursery, and so we had it up on the iPad while also trying to build a dresser, and the IKEA instructions
Ugh,
are
not
so
great.
complicated because they don't use any words. It's all images, and sometimes the images just don't make sense.
I recently constructed I got a new desk. I'm sitting at it right now. And it took me so long. And you need words. I really genuinely feel like you need really explicit instructions and a picture.
Yeah, it took us a while, and it's still not
Yeah.
done. I have to make the actual like drawers now.
Oh my gosh. Well, Godspeed to you for that. Building
Thank you.
IKEA furniture just is it's a whole thing in and of itself.
It is kind of nice though because it is kind of a relationship tester with your partner. Like how do you work with your partner in situations like that? Like everyone
How?
clearly has a role and you're trying to play nicely with one another. I'm really impressed with Zola and I. I thought we did a great job.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that's going to directly correlate to being great parents.
Well, let's hope.
I really do feel like, what role did you play?
Oh, well, because I am, pretty pregnant. So it's kind of hard for me to like bend over and like be
Yeah.
screwing things into like tight angles and stuff. So I'm kind of the reader of the non-word instructions.
The interpreter.
And then I'm picking out the right materials to hand to Zola, who gets to put it all together.
Is Zola patient?
It depends on what he needs to be patient about, but I would say not really.
I feel like I asked exactly the right question in that situation.
I'm like, how do I answer this? Because he's for sure going to listen to this podcast.
Well, we love Zola. Putting things together is very frustrating, and I will say that Pat is probably not very patient in that situation either.
Okay.
Well, what's new with me, everybody, is I have no voice. If you haven't
Yes.
already if you couldn't already tell by the first couple minutes of this episode.
Why? How did you lose it?
Well, I had a wedding on Saturday night. It was okay. I want to talk about this wedding because sometimes I feel like weddings get like a bad rap for like whatever reason. Like, somebody will always be like, the speeches were too long, or like the whatever people say about weddings that kind of makes people be like, oh, I have a wedding. This wedding was like literally so fun. I had the best time. The speeches were perfect. The ceremony was perfect. It was like streamlined. It was like such a fun group of people. The food was good. The drinks were good. The vibe was good. I like made new friends. I hung out with my old friends. I like danced. And I'm like obviously just hoarse because like anytime you give a girl a couple drinks and play songs that I know the words to, I'm like screaming for 2 hours straight.
I mean, obviously. Where was the wedding?
It was in Boston. So we drove down. Pat actually officiated the wedding.
Oh, wow.
So it was like our really good friends. He was the guy's college roommate, and then we went to high school with the girl. So Pat kind of was like I don't know if he necessarily introduced them, but like was kind of the like connector. And so he did such a great job. He looked so cute up there.
Go Pat.
Go Pat. And he had like practiced his speech a couple of times, and it went really well. And I was like really proud of him. I got to like watch him perform.
Oh, that's so great.
I know. So it was like so much fun. I was like so sad when we had to leave because I wanted to just keep dancing. but I like loved it. It was also one of those weddings where like they just like love each other and they're just like actually best friends and like they're very cool and easy to be around and like listening to their vows was really cool. I think maybe the thing with weddings is it's like if you're like too far removed from the couple, you just shouldn't really be there and I felt like I love them both so much and was so happy for them that like I enjoyed every second. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I kind of like piling onto weddings in general?
No, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. The way you feel about that wedding is how I felt about Lynn's wedding.
Oh,
I was like, this is the best wedding I think I've ever been to.
it was just overall like that, very thoughtful, very enjoyable, and just like fun.
Yeah, so fun.
And when you just know the couple is truly really happy, you're just like, yeah, this is like amazing that I'm here to like celebrate them. It's like awesome.
Gotta love, love.
So I had the best time, but sacrificed my voice for work today.
Not very professional of you, but I think we will all forgive you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. I am really excited to get into this today. I want to get into the biggest news coming out of the NWSL, and that's obviously Alyssa Thompson's transfer to Chelsea. This moment last week was like the women's soccer version of Taylor Swift getting engaged. Like literally everybody was talking about it. And I think when the heartbreak slash horror for Angel City fans wore off, a lot of people were left asking why such a high profile American player who's playing in her hometown for a really exciting club in Angel City alongside of her sister would leave the NWSL. And I want to go with Alyssa's perspective here because from what I've heard, there were so many reasons for her to go. First, she's 20 years old and she didn't go to college. And so I can imagine that Alyssa is like excited and ready to leave home for the very first time. So I feel like that's very understandable. And then second, Chelsea is a dream club, one of the best teams in the world, competing for championships every year, playing in Champions League, and is able to pay her a wage that no team in the NWSL could reasonably match with the salary cap the way it is, which we're going to get into a lot in this conversation. But I want to stick with Alyssa for a minute. Becky, what do you think Alyssa was thinking about when this opportunity came up for her?
I think in general, we all underestimate the allure and pull that playing overseas has for a lot of players. And you and I both played in Europe, and it was life changing and enriching, and not just as a player, but as a person. And if Chelsea is Alyssa's dream club and the offer was right, I'd imagine it would be a difficult opportunity to pass up. And I don't see Chelsea being a team that just waits around for the players that they want. Like their success over the past several years, their willingness to spend a lot of money to get the players they want. I mean, they really can pick any players whenever they want to. And so maybe Alyssa also felt a little bit of like a time crunch as well. Like, could this opportunity slip away if I don't accept it right now?
I totally agree with that. I think she's also just at such a critical point in her development and like wanting a change after being at Angel City for several seasons with not that much success. At this point in her career, I'm sure it was like so exciting. And so I feel like from Alyssa's perspective, this was super understandable. I did speak with someone very close to the club at Angel City, and I heard that Angel City did everything they could to keep her, but at a certain point, they reached their limit, which is also understandable. They are under a strict salary cap limit with other players to consider. And Angel City is also a club that's like not going to keep a player against her will, which I know there's like the whole talk of like this is a business and this is sports, but we all agree with the idea of not keeping a player against her will, considering how we have all celebrated the no trades without consent rule and when that got changed in the CBA. So this is similar to that. I think Angel City genuinely was like, if this is what Alyssa wants and this is what's best for her in her view, at a certain point, we're going to do the best we can, but we have to let her go. So every professional sports league is balancing all of this. They're balancing the business side, meaning maximizing profits for owners. They're balancing the players who, of course, all want and should be paid what they deserve and should also be treated very well. They're also balancing the fans who want to watch great players put on great performances and win games for their team. You do kind of need all three sides of this triangle in order to operate and be successful. So I feel like the question now becomes, how do you align all of these interests when sometimes they like oppose one another? And if we zoom out for a second, Becky, at like all sports, do you look at any other leagues right now and think that they're like very close or nailing this kind of like triangle? They're kind of getting it all right.
I don't know if any leagues from top to bottom are getting it right. I think you've got owners and front office staff of particular markets who are trying to get it right for all the parties involved, but maybe have financial constraints like the salary cap. And then in leagues where the salary cap is more soft, sometimes owners are not interested in spending the amount needed to make their teams as competitive as they could be. So you end up with top heavy leagues where the talent is concentrated across 2 to 4 clubs, which is what we often see in the European leagues.
I know. Okay, so this is like where it gets so interesting, and there's so many different ways to go here. We're talking like is let's talk about the salary cap. Let's talk about parity. Let's talk about the owners. Let's talk about the. There's so many things for us to talk about. We keep coming up against the salary cap, so I want to start there. Just in case anybody doesn't know, the salary cap limits the amount of money a club can spend on player salaries. So that number was negotiated into the CBA and it applies to every team. The base salary cap is $3.3 million in 2025 and it's going up to $5.1 million in 2030. So it's like steadily rising over the period of this CBA. It's also supplemented by a rev share with the league based on the previous season's media and sponsorship revenue. So in 2025, the salary cap is actually $3.5 million once you've factored in that rev share and will hopefully continue to receive like supplementation over the course of the CBA, allowing it to grow even beyond that 5.1 number. But so what this means right now is that each team is splitting in 2025 $3.5 million amongst their entire roster. And after this Alyssa Thompson transfer happened, a lot of people are coming out saying we need to abolish the salary cap completely so that we can compete to keep players like Alyssa and Naomi, who also was transferred earlier this year, and keep them here in the NWSL. I think there are, on the other hand, some people who worry that we would be doing that at the expense of parity within our league. And there's a lot to get into here, but Becky, what's your initial thought with abolishing the salary cap?
Oh, okay. I think we've reached a bit of an inflection point for the NWSL. Something has to give, or else we will continue to lose some big name players, and not just the big name players, but players you want to build franchises around, players you want in your league for the majority of their careers. You'll continue to either lose those players or be able to attract big name players to the league. So I think introducing a designated player rule, which is something that we've talked about before, is a possible good solution. These players' salaries do not hit the salary cap at their full amounts, which allows for teams to have franchise players and for the teams to have the money to fill out the rest of the roster with strong professionals. So, for example, you could pay a top player over $1 million per year, but their salary only hits the cap at 500K. It keeps the competitiveness of the league comparable while also giving teams the opportunity to keep or attract the type of talent that helps to sell tickets.
Yeah, I think the designated player rule does sound familiar to me. You and I have definitely talked about it before. And it's something that we can talk about as like a possible solution to losing talent to England or Europe in general. I want to go over the WSL, which doesn't have a salary cap. Instead, teams are allowed to spend a percentage of their revenue. So when a team like Chelsea comes to Alyssa Thompson and Angel City with an incredible offer, Angel City is kind of prevented from keeping Alyssa because Chelsea's making an offer that isn't limited in the same way that Angel City's offer has to be limited. So this brings me back to the idea, are we going to abolish the salary cap? There's obviously pros and cons that come with this. The con is one of the cons is that the NWSL could lose parity because owners like Willow Bay and Bob Iger at Angel City or Michelle King, the Spirit, would probably, as they've been doing, invest a ton more money in their rosters, while owners in smaller markets might not be able to. And it could stop feeling like any team in the NWSL could win any game. And I think what's interesting about that to me is like, shouldn't the most invested owners be rewarded? But on the other side, it's like, what if we lose parity? That's something we've always had here. And Becky, I need so much help here from you because I don't know the answer to this. Does parity matter?
If the salary cap isn't rising commensurate to the market for players, we're going to lose players, both the top players and the role players that are critical to a team's success. So it's really getting to what's the lesser evil here. Do we want a league where players aren't paid their value for the sake of parity and at the expense of the quality of play? To me, that's actually the worst outcome. We suppress player compensation so that every team has a chance to win an NWSL championship and lose good players in the process. The US is an icon driven market. We love our stars, we love our celebrities. So honestly, I'm a little surprised we haven't seen a designated player rule introduced yet. there are some pending free agents who have contracts up either this year or next year who can and should command big contracts. And I haven't heard a compelling argument from ownership or the league office as to why a designated player role isn't feasible for the NWSL.
I know. This brings me back to my previous point of like, shouldn't the most invested owners be able to succeed freely? And when you say this is like an icon, it's like Angel City should be winning. And like, I feel like, look, I mean, it's like no offense to Kansas City. Kansas City's doing an incredible job. You know, they've built their own stadium. Kansas City is like up here doing something different than everybody else. But it's like Angel City is like a huge market with a really invested ownership group with what should be the most star-studded team. And instead, they're like losing their young up and coming franchise player because their owners aren't allowed to like commit to her. But it's also like not this simple. Like my natural inclination is to be like, what's best for the players, pay them more money. That's the only answer that matters here. But I do have a couple more questions and like considerations before we kind of come to our like agreed solution. I hope, Becky, I hope this doesn't turn into a fight. Do you think Alyssa Thompson would have stayed at Angel City if they had been able to match Chelsea's offer?
I think that is very hard to answer without knowing Alyssa and her aspirations and intentions. I think it's tough to put a price on a dream. And if her dream is to play for Chelsea, I mean, okay. But do I think adding a couple zeros onto a contract can make that decision a little bit harder? Sure.
I know. I think that there's an angle that's like it's all about the money, but it's obviously not. Like the
Right.
money is so important, but we know we're former players. Like the dream is to win the World Cup and be on the national team and be the best player in the world and make money and play in a new place. And like the list of things that a player wants to accomplish over a hopefully 10 to 15 year career is really long. And like playing at home with your sister in front of your family is something that Alyssa has already accomplished. Maybe she'll get to do it again someday. That's really cool. I don't think that even if Angel City could have matched the offer, I don't think she would have stayed. I think players at that age in that situation who have aspirations like I imagine Alyssa does want to go and do something new. So I think my next thing is like, is this as big of a deal as we're all making it out to be? Like, I think that it feels right now like more players than ever before are playing overseas. And I think that that's true. If you look at this time in the cycle, let's say before the 2019 World Cup, so like in the summer of 2017, that's 2 years before the World Cup. We're 2 years before 2027. Only one player on the national team roster was playing in Europe. That was Crystal Dunn, who also played for Chelsea. Now we have Emily Fox, Jenna Nicewanger, Alyssa Thompson, Kat Macario, Naomi Girma, all in the WSL in England. And then in France, we have Corbin Albert, Lindsay Heaps, Lily Johannes, and Crystal Dunn again. So what is this a huge deal? Is the NWSL struggling to retain talent in the way that we're all kind of flipping out that it is?
Well, I think we need to keep a little bit of perspective because when you're talking about 2017, the US Soccer Federation at the time were the stewards for the league and were effectively paying the US women's national team players' salaries for the NWSL as well as paying for our international duties. So there were stipulations in our contract that if too many of us played outside of the NWSL, it would actually affect all of our bottom lines.
That was when we were called allocated players. In a way, was that like we were designated players because our salaries were subsidized?
Yeah, I think you could absolutely think of it in that way because we did hit the salary cap, but at a reduced amount than what we were actually making.
Right.
So the concept has already kind of been introduced into the NWSL.
And do you think what good did that do for the league?
It kept talent within the league. I think the federation and ownership at the time knew that the draw of women's national team players would sell tickets and attract sponsorships
And stabilize the league.
and stabilize the
Yeah.
league. Yes. While also not hitting the ownership's pockets at a way that at the time, a lot of ownerships probably wouldn't have been able to handle that because they didn't have as deep of pockets at the time.
Or we just would have had to like take pay cuts or go to Europe.
Yes, exactly. So the federation, I mean, they wanted to keep national team players domestic and actively negotiated for that. So I kind of wonder if that stipulation had not been agreed upon in our CBA, would we have seen more players playing overseas back then? And so I say all that, and I think that the NWSL is being challenged to retain talent right now because the global market is getting just so much more competitive. And the rest of the world, I think, is waking up to the fact that they can leverage the big brands and the global appeal, like an Arsenal, like a Chelsea, to make money on their women's teams, either now or they see the vision of it for the future.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think that when these huge global football brands realized that their women's teams were worth investing in, this was always going to happen. Like the NBA, it's the same way that like the MLS is like, would lose talent to the Premier League or another league in Europe that can pay more. It's like the Premier League is a dream. Playing in Europe is a dream. Playing for this like globally recognized club is a dream, and they're paying me more. That's why like talent and the best players are like going abroad. So I think that while we're all like kind of internally panicking about losing players, zooming out, it's like something that should be celebrated, that like more and more people are realizing what a great investment this is, and like that women's football is this great business opportunity, and that we are worth investing in. One consideration that I still have is that, and I don't want us to like ever forget this, the NWSL is such a young league. So like comparing us to anybody else is kind of silly because we're so young, and to stabilize and grow, we need to like consider the age of the league.
If you think about it, we've had 3 iterations of a professional league. 2 iterations failed after the 3rd year. A lot of that is because financially, the business, like the math wasn't mathin'. And so I think we do need to be very conscious of, we are in a growing league. We are not in, like you said, an established league. And so there needs to be steps and there needs to be adjustment and there needs to be a lot of freaking self-awareness. And I think like maybe we're losing a little bit of perspective on that.
When we talk about the age of the NWSL and having this little bit of like conservativeness when it comes to like how quickly we abolish the salary cap or how quickly we grow, I don't want to be like, well, the players have to be patient. I want the players to make their market value. And that's why I feel like you and I are like looking for a solution that protects the league, that may or may not need to be protected. It is a young league, so maybe it does, but also pays the players and makes the fans have fun and makes them happy and want to cheer for their team. So I started trying to like go outside of soccer and like look at other possible solutions. You mentioned a designated player rule. Of course, we're hearing about abolishing the salary cap altogether. There are other leagues that we can look at that are player focused and successful leagues. And I do think that the designated player rule kind of reminds people of MLS. So I wanted to find another example of an exemption or like a luxury tax, something that worked somewhere else. And I was reading about the NBA when they were a young league. They introduced the Larry Bird rule. It's called Bird's Rights now, which enables teams to go over the cap to re-sign their own free agent. And the NBA doesn't like really have the kind of international competition for players that we're dealing with. The NWSL is having players go to Europe, players go, like it's such a draw for them to go play elsewhere. The NBA doesn't exactly have that. Neither does the NFL. Like those leagues are the best ones. So players actually want to come and play here. But it feels like something that could be good for all three sides of the triangle, like having a Larry Bird like rule, which is not too dissimilar from a DP rule, but it's good for the business side because the team is keeping a franchise player. It's good for the fans who love that player, and it's good for the player who deserves to be paid more money. So it's like this idea of a soft cap, even one where this is the luxury tax idea, but it's like you can go over the cap, Angel City, but you have to pay extra. So it's like if you want to keep Alyssa Thompson and go above 3.5, it costs you whatever percent more. And some owners, that would be worth it for the player, for their fan, for their like fan group. Like some owners, Michelle Kang would pay that. Like, so
Yeah,
it
heartbeat.
does kind of like reward. I mean, all of us will chip in to keep Trinity Rodman at the Spirit, I think. Like we'll help you pay for it, Michelle Kang. But it's like it does reward the most invested owners, but it doesn't like totally wipe out the teams that can't do it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think I really love the part where, because a team has already invested time, money, energy into a player, and they have reached a place in their career where they probably are a high appeal to other leagues and other teams. But the fact that you are the one that invested in them, that you get a chance to be rewarded by keeping them. So
Yeah.
I like that part of it a lot. And I think that should be seriously considered.
Again, it's very similar to your idea. There's some exemption in the salary cap, some sort of soft cap, some sort of, rule that applies to certain players. Okay, Becky, we're up against our real challenge right now because now we have to do our Olipop gut check of the week.
Whew, okay.
And we have to succinctly put all the conversation that we just had about salary cap succinctly into one answer. So our Olipop gut check of the week: should the NWSL abolish the salary cap?
Wow, you really went for it, didn't you? Okay. I don't think you can completely abolish the salary cap. I think the NWSL would run the risk of losing some ownership groups who just aren't interested in getting into a free for all at this time. And I think raising the cap commensurate to the way that the growth of the women's game is going, introducing a designated player rule or something similar, I think these could be good first steps. And then you just adjust as you need to.
Okay, I totally respect that answer. I do have a follow-up question, and I'm breaking the rules of the Olipop gut check of the week.
Okay.
You said we could risk, if we
Yep.
abolish the salary cap, we could risk losing some ownership groups who maybe can't afford it or aren't interested in spending that kind of money. Should we? Should they not be? Should they not be in the league anymore? Should they sell their team if they're not interested in investing at that level?
I think, yes, it is okay for some ownership groups to feel the pressure and, hey, I am not interested in getting into a free for all. I will sell to this group. Like, I think there needs to be like a succession plan for sure. But my worry is that some ownership groups are just going to be like, nah, I'm out. And so I worry for some markets because I think there are owners that are willing to say, hey, I'm going to invest a lot in this. And I know I'm not going to see return of that investment until 10, 15 years down the road. There are going to be some ownership groups that are like, I can't do that right now. I don't have deep enough pockets, or I'm just not interested in it. So I'm out. So I think we would have to be careful. But yeah, do I think some ownership groups we could say goodbye to? Yeah, I do.
Okay. I feel like that was like a really great answer. And I thought that was a really tricky question. So I just wanted to give you a little cheers.
Well, thanks.
Okay. I have to answer my own question. Sometimes I try to
Yes.
sneak myself out of these. Should the NWSL abolish the salary cap? I'm saying not yet. I'm looking at the age of our league and the steps we need to take before we're ready to completely abolish it. I want the salary cap to keep growing as the league keeps growing. And that's the plan in the CBA. I think we could maybe go a little bit higher than what we've agreed to in the CBA. I think everybody would be really happy with that. But I say keep raising the cap. I'm also interested in putting in some sort of exception, some sort of a soft cap, a luxury tax rule of sorts. I want players to get paid more. I want owners to compete with clubs in Europe to keep top talent here. I want to know what everybody thinks. Is parity important? Do fans care? Is that going to affect everybody's bottom line? I don't really want to watch all 8-0 games. I know they're not all going to be 8-0, but I'm like, even if I'm a player, I want to play in a competitive league. I don't want to trade off player salaries for anything, but I think that there's a nuance here that we need to consider. So, everybody, can you come be with us on Discord? Can we talk about this more? I want to learn more about it. I want to learn more about other leagues. I want to really broaden all of our horizons. So let's have a conversation. Let us know in the comments what you think. Come to Discord and let's talk about it. That was our Olipop Gut Check of the week. Okay, everybody, that was a lot to get into. So believe it or not, we have more podcasts to do about other stuff. It's crazy. Transfer news aside, it was also an exciting week in the NWSL as the playoff race continues to heat up. Kansas City kept on rolling with a 2-0 win against Bay, and yet another Temwa Chewinga goal, her 12th of the year. If you missed my interview with Temwa Chewinga, it came out last week, and it was really, really wonderful. So check that out on YouTube. Also, Seattle took on Washington at Audi Field, and the home fans got to see a brace from Trinity Rodman. Becky, Trinity looked great. I loved watching the Spirit play. I love watching them play in DC. Another very special thing that happened in the game was that Ben Shelton got Trinity back and interviewed her on TV after the game. And it was very cute. Did you see that?
I only saw a little bit of it on social media. I watched a majority of the game and then changed over because, like I said, there was just so many sports on this weekend. So I changed after the final whistle and I didn't see it live. But how was the interview? Is it super cute?
It was actually literally so cute. And I remember being like, okay, so in case anybody missed it, Trinity after one of Ben's tennis matches, asked a question from like at the presser, and it was so cute. Ben laughed, he answered it. It was very sweet. So this time it was the opposite. Ben was like on the mic chatting to Trinity after she scores 2 goals in this great game for Washington. And he had his questions all memorized. And as somebody who like doesn't feel like I could memorize questions like that,
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
these two need to have a sports podcast, them two as a couple. I literally was like coming up on the spot with like
A pitch.
a very successful podcast for these two, because I'm like, it would be so good. And his questions were so good. And I'm like, I'd listen. Like, they're so cute.
They are very cute.
They're really cute.
Her question to him after his match about like not reaching a certain speed with his serve, I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, Trin, go in.
I know. I was like, whoa. And I think it was all set up for him. Somebody was like, you could tell they were like listening to somebody in their ear about maybe he was supposed to ask her like kind of a hard gotcha question back, but he didn't. He was nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Way to keep it classy.
It was very classy. It was very cute. I like loved it so much. But obviously, Trin scoring 2 goals is the real storyline here. They were both great.
Both first-time finishes.
I know. And it was really fun to see her and Croy back out there like combining together. I was excited about that, and I feel like the Spirit are like got their sights set again, like they're back on track. Okay, the other storyline we want to talk about, Chicago, who are also back on track. They played their first game at their new home on the Northwestern campus. The team is going to relocate to that field full-time next season. So this is just a little preview of what's to come. And what's to come apparently is tons of goals. There were 7 goals in the second half. Chicago beat Orlando 5-2. And I'm loving seeing Chicago on this great upswing. But I know there were some mixed reactions about the announcement of this relocation for the Stars. The stadium is a turf field, and it's on a college campus, and they're sharing it with a bunch of other teams, which obviously isn't ideal. But I will say that this stadium is much more accessible to fans compared to SeatGeek, which was that's where the Stars play now. That's like out in Bridgeview, Illinois, which is like not easily accessible to the city. And they've been struggling with attendance. So it was cool to see at Northwestern, they had over 10,000 fans there. Do you have any strong thoughts on this move for Chicago, Becky?
I think for as long as I've played against Chicago, they've always struggled to get attendance at SeatGeek or whatever the name of the stadium was throughout the years. And I think it's also, on the other hand, totally acceptable and understandable for people to have reservations about moving the home stadium to a college campus and a turf field at that. Neither is ideal. So I think my hope for the organization is that by making the team more accessible, by getting more fans in the stands, that this could be another temporary solution before some real investment can go into finding them a permanent home that kind of checks all the boxes.
Yeah, I read that that's what the owner's kind of comment was like, we think this is better and this is temporary. And
Okay.
there's like talk of, hopefully there's talk of something else. I did kind of notice that the players didn't really like engage much with the announcement. And so I wonder how they feel about it, because obviously, as we've made very clear in this podcast, we are player first. I hope that this is a step up for them. I hope it's a step up for the club. And I also hope that it's temporary and that something even better comes along down the road. One last piece of news before we take a quick break, and that's that San Diego Wave retired Alex Morgan's number 13 jersey on Sunday night's game, and they went all out for the ceremony. Buildings around the city lit up pink on Saturday night in honor of Alex. There was a giant number 13 made of pre-wrap, a mural of Alex painted in the city, and a really beautiful ceremony after the game. I saw Ellie Krieger did a really nice speech for Alex. The Houston Dash did spoil the party a little bit with their 3-0 win against the Wave, which was surprising, but okay, Dash. But obviously, getting your jersey retired is really, really cool and so well-deserved for Alex Morgan.
It was so lovely. And I was assembling the IKEA furniture, so we like lost a little track of time, and I turned on the game late, and the game had already started. I was like, "Oh no, I missed the ceremony!" So I was like thrilled to find out that it was post game, and it was really lovely. And I mean, like you said, just so well deserved. Alex has been so instrumental into the success of the growth of our game, and both internationally and domestically. And so I just think it's really great when teams like take the time to really appreciate and show love and admiration to these players, because they are really, really important to the story of our game. And so, yeah, Alex deserves all of it.
I know, it was awesome to see. All right, everybody, we need to take a really quick break before we dive into the return of the WSL, but don't go anywhere because we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so the Women's Super League in England returned this past weekend, kicking off the 2025-2026 season. There have been so many changes in the league and on these teams, and so I kind of wanted us to just go through and talk a little bit about every team. So we've organized them by where they ended last season on the table, but of course we need to say that after this first weekend, I can see that there could be some shifts coming. So we're obviously going to be starting off with Chelsea. Chelsea have won everything except for Champions League. For the last 6 years, Chelsea have totally dominated the WSL. And last year, they were nearly perfect. They didn't lose a single game in the league under new head coach Sonia Bonpastor. 24-25 seemed like the year that they were finally going to be able to win the Champions League, despite losing head coach Emma Hayes. If you don't know, Champions League is the league for the best teams across all of the different European leagues. So it's kind of like a World Cup of club, which isn't really that because there is now a World Cup of club, isn't there, Becky?
There is called the Club World Cup.
It's like a regional club World Cup, but it's a very prestigious tournament. I'm pretty sure everybody knows. So Chelsea made it all the way to the Champions League semifinal where they lost kind of significantly to Barcelona. But this year, Chelsea have brought in some really exciting new players like Ellie Carpenter, who looked great this weekend. She got an assist. And of course, Alyssa Thompson, as well as Naomi Girma, who technically was on the team starting last January, but she should now be like really more worked into the team. I'm excited to see her have a big impact for Chelsea this year. Plus, Chelsea have legends like Sam Kerr, who will be returning after a long injury battle. So I think Chelsea are poised to stay at the top of the WSL and fight for Champions League again.
Okay, well, from one Champions League hopeful to a Champions League champion,
Love
it's
that.
Arsenal. Look, even as a fan, I was stunned that they fought their way to the Champions League final and that they won it last year. I can't lie about that. And that's because Arsenal looked super uneven all season in the Women's Super League. And even as they were beating teams like Lyon, they were falling to teams way down the table at home. So now that they're champions of Europe, there will be a lot of expectation on them to play like champions. That means really going for the top spot here. And they looked great in their opening match, winning 4-1 with big goals from subs coming off the bench, as well as the 20-year-old new signing, Olivia Smith. Sam, what are you expecting from this team?
I mean, look, I know I made it very clear last year during Champions League that I thought Barcelona was going to beat them, but Arsenal are a great team. I love that they play at Emirates Stadium. They are like have such engaged fans. So Arsenal's always really fun to watch. And I think the main thing I noticed this past weekend was their depth. And I think depth will continue to be the thing that sets Chelsea and Arsenal apart from pretty much everybody else in the table. And it's that Arsenal subbed on Beth Mead and Caitlin Ford and Stina Blackstenius. And it's like no other club has that many quality players on their bench to start games. So I'm excited about Arsenal. Do I think they could beat Chelsea in the league? We'll find out maybe sometime if I directly get asked the question. Arsenal wasn't the only team that surprised us last year, though. So did Manchester United. They had some struggles in past seasons, but last year it felt like Man U was really playing consistently good football. They're led up top by Ella Toone and led in goal by none other than the U.S. Women's National Team's own Fallon Tellis-Joyce. Much like the rest of her team, Fallon really felt like a player coming into her power last season. She played so well. I almost forgot that she had kind of stepped up into the shoes of the legendary Mary Earps, who left for PSG. Fallon even became the first American keeper last year to win the Golden Glove, which she shared with Chelsea's Hannah Hampton. And if you look at where we are in the international cycle, this season could be really key for Fallon to kind of try to earn that role for the 2027 World Cup, that starting goalkeeper position. Becky, how crucial do you think Fallon and Manchester United's performance is this season for Fallon's World Cup chances?
Well, I think her performance last season put her on the map. And so now she's like fresh in the sights of Emma Hayes and the national team. And so I think her continuing to perform, comparably to how she performed last year is important for her and for her future success with the women's national team. But I think she's now more established within the pool. And so it's really going to be when she's brought into camp and she's playing against the top international talent, how is she performing in those games? And so I think it's important, but I think like what she's already done, like that body of work has put her on the map already. And then from one end of Manchester to the other, Sam, we're going to talk about your former club, Man City. And they were beleaguered last season with star after star being sidelined with injuries. They didn't make too many splashy offseason signings except for a new coach. So it seems like they're really going to be relying on those formerly injured players like a Lauren Hemp, Viv Miedema, Bunny Shaw being back to full form. But it just seems like they're going to have the same issue here as they did last year, a bench that is just not deep enough to really compete with the other top of the table teams like an Arsenal or a Chelsea.
I know, I agree. I want to feel that like commitment to being the best. And it's like there are key elements like Viv Miedema, Bunny Shaw, Lauren Hemp, Alex Greenwood. Like, of course, there are players there that you're like, yeah, they're great. They are a big investment, but it's like I feel like Chelsea has 10 players that you would just list off that you're like, this team wants to win everything.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm kind of waiting to see that from Man City. Other thing to note, just that they did that little switcheroo between City and United, switched Jess Park and Grace Clinton, who were like both kind of like attacking midfield players. And I thought that was so interesting. And I bet they didn't even need to move apartments. I feel like they probably just said, okay, I'll drive somewhere else in the morning. So I
Oh,
found that
how
like really
strange.
funny. Okay, so that was the top four. We're going to move down to the WSL's middle of the table, which is full of teams who would love to climb up the table, but kind of have no way to do so, usually just because of that lack of investment. So instead, when I look at these teams, we're kind of looking at clubs that are just trying not to get relegated. That's what happens to the last place teams who will move from the WSL down a tier to the WSL 2. But when we watch these teams, I'm also kind of trying to look at individual players who can shine and improve their profile. Just because their team maybe can't break out doesn't mean they can't. And there's no individual player on these mid-table teams that I am as excited to watch as Michelle Agyemang. Michelle was the breakout teenage star of the Euros for England. She saved England's tournament not once but twice with huge goals. She's technically an Arsenal player, but she's on loan to Brighton, so she'll be playing here for her second season. Brighton finished in 5th place last year, so safe from relegation, not necessarily a huge threat to the top clubs. But Becky, as an Arsenal fan, what do you think a player like Michelle should be trying to get out of her time with Brighton?
I don't think there is any equivalent to the actual playing of significant minutes in competitive matches. And you can be in a strong training environment, and that's helpful to development. But I really think the greatest teacher will always be the game and playing in the game. So I would want Michelle to be playing a lot of minutes and like just further discovering what makes her special and how she can highlight those things,
Mhm.
but also discovering any gaps in her game that she can work on. And I think she should really be trying to become the most complete player she can be in case she's ever called back to Arsenal.
That makes a lot of sense, Becky, and I definitely think after her performance at the Euros, she'll have a lot of eyes on her, and Arsenal will be, like, ready to call her back the minute they, like, have, an opening or a need for her. We already talked about their depth, but I think that there will come a time that Arsenal's just like, "Nope, she's ours."
And another player in this mid-table I want to talk about is Shakira Martínez, who plays for West Ham. And she came into the league from Germany last year in January, so midway through the season. But still, she exploded onto the scene, scoring 10 goals in her 12 games played. And by the end of the season, she was nipping at the heels of the Golden Boot winners. I'm so curious to see what she can do with a full season. I could easily see a Ludmilla Stars situation here because
Boy.
Shakira also scores hat tricks. And Sam, you famously said an MVP can't be on a bad team, but then you also said the
Mm.
opposite, and you agreed with me about Ludmilla. Let's talk about that.
I know, Becky. So, in case you missed it, Becky and I a couple of weeks ago had this whole long discussion about if the NWSL MVP could be on like not a team fighting for a playoff spot or not a top team. We kind of disagreed. I said I said, and I quote, it would take a lot for a player to be in the MVP conversation and not be on a top team or a playoff team. And Becky was kind of like, I don't really understand why the best team, the most valuable player is the most valuable player, whatever team they're on. Did I capture that okay?
Yeah, I just love that you went back to quote yourself. And so I love that we're just parsing words now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I had to double check because
You were feeling a certain way.
because I knew that you would come for me on this one. And so then last week with Lynn, I basically said that Ludmilla should be in the MVP conversation in the NWSL because look at how great she's doing for Chicago. Chicago's obviously like not one of the top teams right now. So I kind of went back on my word a little bit, but technically I did say that it would take a lot. And I think Ludmilla is doing a lot. And do I think Shakira Martínez could also do a lot? Yeah.
Okay. How the tables have turned.
Have they?
You played it diplomatically enough where like you could kind of take it back
I
enough.
reined it back in a little bit.
You
Becky.
reined it back in. I'll give that to you.
I'll do anything for an Olipop Gut Check of the Week.
I know, except for sometimes answer your own questions.
Except for actually answer a hard question. Okay, I feel like I wriggled myself out of that one pretty good.
You did.
So, speaking of individual great performances, one of the WSL's most consequential great performances last season wasn't out on the field, but on the sidelines. It was Aston Villa, who was facing financial chaos, facing relegation, and then they got this incredible new coach, Natalia Arroyo. Not only did she save the team from sinking down a league, but by the end of the season, she had them beating teams like Arsenal. I think it's just so incredible what the right coach can do for a team that might have like less resources on paper or you know less talented players on paper, but when the right coach comes in and can really influence the group and like rally the group together, it can turn everything around. So I'm actually really excited to see what Natalia Arroyo's long-term effect on Aston Villa will be.
Yeah, that's really baller. Like what putting the right puzzle piece can do. Fittingly, our last two mid-table teams are both from Liverpool. Let's start with Liverpool itself, who I have real concerns about, especially after they lost their most promising player, Olivia Smith, to Arsenal. And I have to say, after this weekend, my concerns feel kind of valid. Last year, they had a pretty uneven season and sacked the coach who had pulled them back up from the lower tiers. That coach, Matt Beard, had made no secret of the limited budget he was working with. And I don't think he was the only one frustrated. It must have killed fans of the club to watch the men's side be so successful and the women's side struggle due to a lack of investment. They did bring on a new coach, Man City's former manager, Gareth Taylor, and they did make a couple of signings to replace Smith. But I don't know, Sam, when we talk about the WSL versus the NWSL, we talk a lot about the money that the WSL clubs are able to pull from the men's side, but does that matter if the sibling relationship just feels so uneven?
I know. I feel like Manchester United has been really part of this conversation too, because for years it felt like United really wasn't investing. And like Manchester United is like one of the most globally recognized clubs. It's like one of the most historic and well-known stadiums. Like, and it just feels that while some clubs like Chelsea and Arsenal are really taking seriously their women's sides, and like again, to point to Arsenal selling out the Emirates Stadium regularly, some of the clubs are still kind of stuck in that mindset of like the women's team is secondary. And so I think Liverpool is another good example of an ownership group that doesn't feel like the women's side is as deserving of good treatment and real investment as the men's side. And that's something that weirdly we're not struggling with here in the NWSL, because our so many of our teams are like more independent and like more, the NWSL feels like more of its own thing, whereas like the WSL is so everybody's paired up except for the London City Lionesses with a men's club. So in that way, it feels like the women's sides are more reliant on men's football. Okay, so then on the other side of town, we have Everton, the other club based in Liverpool. And unlike their crosstown rivals, this club is actually seeing some really exciting moves happening. They've had some big player signings. Plus, now they're playing in Goodison Park, a really historic stadium. That's where the men used to play. It's a big step up from where the women used to play. And I feel like you could just kind of feel that buzz around this Everton team this weekend. They had a big 4-1 win over Liverpool, including a hat trick. And that rivalry game is called the Merseyside Derby. So it was definitely a good start for Everton. And I can't really stress enough how much this move to Goodison Park feels like the ownership being like, okay, we're going to have a look at the women's team and like see what we can do with them, which feels like a step in the right direction.
Okay, it's time for our bottom of the table teams. These are the teams that really do need to worry about being dropped down based on past performances. And I would say the top of the danger zone for me is Leicester. They had a super quiet offseason in terms of trades. And then right before the season started, like 11 days before they parted ways with their coach. I have similar concerns about Tottenham, who really slipped down the table last year. Although they did pull off a win over West Ham in their opener, they made some good offseason signings too, including a new coach who has spoken about the absolute emotional rock bottom the players were at last season. And I can imagine why. Something that is really interesting about the WSL is that by the end of the season,
Yeah.
you are watching the bottom of the table as closely as the top, because there's really something about watching players who are fighting for their WSL lives. Sam, from a player perspective, do you think the relegation clock starts ticking from the very first game? Do you feel that pressure from the get?
I mean, I think if you lose your first game and you see that you have 0 points and that maybe only a couple of other teams have 0 points and they're all the teams that you'd expect, you're probably like, "Ugh, like, here we go." Especially if you've hit an emotional rock bottom the season before, it feels like sometimes that feels like it carries over, and you can go through this great preseason and this great summer, and you can think everything's gonna be different now, and then that one loss is like, "Oh, no, it's not. It's not actually gonna be different at all. It's gonna be the exact same struggle." I think for teams in a relegation zone, historically, one win is like a humongous deal. And so, yeah, I think you're kind of like staring at that 0 in the points column and being like, we just gotta get something.
Okay.
So it could, I imagine, could be like really, really difficult. But on the other end of that relegation weird, sad dance, you have promotion, and that's the team that gets to come up from the lower tier if they win the league. And in past years, the WSL2 team that fought their way up frequently would fall right back down. Some have argued that that could be because those teams weren't ready to face the Chelseas of the world, or that their owners just weren't ready to make any sort of a difference in investment when expected to compete at a higher level. But this year, I feel like we're going to get an answer to that debate because the London City Lionesses are playing in the WSL for the first time after being promoted. And this feels like such a big deal, I think, especially to us Americans, because this is the first time the league will ever have a team that's not tied to a men's side. The club is tied to Michelle Kang, though. She's obviously the American businesswoman who also owns the Spirit here in the NWSL and Lyonnaise in France. She's made massive investments into this London City Lionesses club, totally revamped the roster, including bringing on French star Grace Gioro for a world record breaking transfer fee of $1.9 million. I feel like every time I turned around over the past couple weeks, London City Lionesses was signing somebody new. And so this club is really kicking things off by being like, we're not going back down. Unfortunately, they had to play Arsenal first and they lost 4-1. So they do still have a 0 in the points column, which can be tough to see. I know you're a fan of Arsenal, Becky, but I do hope that the Lionesses start getting some wins. I just think, as we've talked about so much before, I think success for an independent team backed by an investor who really sees it as a great business opportunity is good for women's football because it signals that what Michelle King is doing, investing in teams like this, works. Becky, talk to me about what it's been like for you to watch the London City Lionesses come together and maybe what you're looking for out of them for this first season of theirs in the top tier.
So I actually watched that game against Arsenal, even though it was ass
I
early
know
on
I
the
was
West
gonna
Coast.
say why.
It was so early, and yeah, I was up. So I was like, I'm just gonna turn this sucker on and see what the Lionesses are all
Wow.
about. I know. Like you said, it's a tough ask to open your WSL campaign against Arsenal. But with that said, you could see the quality of the Lionesses side. And yeah, they were outplayed by Arsenal, but I do think this team will be competitive and that Michelle King in the front office, they've done an extremely admirable job putting a team together. A lot of these moves for the players have happened really recently,
Yeah.
and we've talked before
Like
about
weeks or days ago.
exactly before the game. And so I think it's just going to take a week, a few weeks for this team to really gel. But I absolutely think that they're going to be competitive. And I think they are assembling the parts to be competitive. It's just maybe going to take a few games, but I am not worried about them being relegated at all. I think they are going to compete, be mid to top table.
Wow. Okay, amazing. I'm not worried about them being relegated either. I did think as the game wore on, they looked pretty sus in their defensive box. But it was against Arsenal. I'm like, you can't just have Beth Mead
Meeting.
beef
Yeah.
beef meeting.
But of all the positions and units on the field, the back line is the one that takes the longest to gel. And
Totally. And
so,
they haven't
like
had any time. You're right.
and so that makes the most sense to me is that they are going to give up goals. I think they're gonna score goals, but I think they are gonna give up goals for a while, and then they're gonna
Yeah.
shore it up.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And you know what? I love that. Let's see some 5-4s, everybody.
Okay. My heart hurts a little bit with that, but that's okay.
All right, everybody. That was our quick run through of the WSL. Big season ahead. I know we're all very, very excited. We do need to take one more quick break, but we'll be right back with some news and an email from Niti. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, before we get to the inbox, we have a few quick hits of news from around the soccer world. Nigerian star Champions League and WAFCON winner Asisat Oshoala, who up until recently was playing with Bay FC, has left the NWSL for the Saudi Women's Premier League. She will now be playing with Al Hilal, one of 10 teams in the Saudi League, which was founded in 2022.
In news we just love to see, last week the Brazilian player Luana returned to the field with the Orlando Pride for the first time in 18 months after beating cancer. Luana and the Pride were playing in a CONCACAF Champions Cup group stage game, one they would go on later to win. Congratulations, Luana. It is great to see you back on the field. And finally, an extremely big congratulations to Sophia Wilson, who just became a mom. She and her husband announced last week that they had welcomed a baby girl, Gianna. So congratulations.
Becky, more babies in Portland.
More babies.
Oh my goodness. So exciting. Okay, everybody, let's go over to the inbox where we got a great email from Niti. Niti writes, "Hey Sam, Lynn, and Becky. First, super quick shout out to Becky as a fellow Ladue Ram alum, Olivet childhood resident, and Stacy Park raised gal. Becky, do you know all of these places?"
All of these places. That is my high school, my hometown, and the first park I ever played soccer in.
Is that why your cat is named Olive?
It's not, but that's a really lovely thing that I could have said yes to, but it's not the reason she's called Olive.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Needy. She writes, "So cool to watch you and root for you, and congrats on the growing family. I wanted to reach out after the news of Alyssa's transfer to Chelsea to ask about the process of moving teams. How quick is a turnaround, and what's moving like? Is there a transition time, or do you just head to training right away? When Naomi Girma left, it really felt like she lived in San Diego one day, the UK the next, and was right on the pitch, which I guess is how life works, but it just seems like such a massive and quick transition. So I'm hoping to hear more from your experiences. Thanks so much, Needy." Needy, I actually really love and appreciate this question because you're coming at it from like a human element. Whereas Becky and I talked for 35 minutes about a salary cap. Now we get to talk about what it's actually like for a player to up and move across the world and try to play with a new team.
I don't think there's enough research out there about what stress does to an athletic body. And I kind of like there's a lot of stress that goes into upending your life and being like, yes, I am going to move from Los Angeles and go to London and everything that entails. It is a lot. And I think people can lose sight of that and what it does to your body and like the stress of the move and like the decision making. And so I think that teams are now being very thoughtful about how they phase in a player, and they might want you in market right away and you might be on the training ground, but I don't think that they're necessarily participating in full training right away nowadays. I think they're being a little bit more considerate about like steps to integrate a player into a league because they are very different leagues, the WSL and the NWSL. And so, especially coming into the NWSL, if you're thinking about the opposite direction, our league, you cover so much more ground. It is so transitional. The loading is different. And so I know when I've talked to sport performance teams here in the States, they're being so much more careful with players that are coming in from different leagues. And so I think that's becoming more of like a global standard. I don't know, Sam, have you ever thought about this or am I nerding out on something just wild?
No, I think that I've thought about this a lot as well. I think it's like, I mean, when I went to Manchester, it was COVID. So my transition was already like very like regimented. Like I had to live in a hotel for 2 weeks and go to the training facility by myself for 2 weeks and just be outside on the field doing like individual running. But I think that to your point, Becky, there's a ton of stress. Isn't moving one of like life's most stressful events?
Yes,
So
it's
you're
like one of the top
moving.
3. Yeah.
You're moving, but you're also literally going to a new country, being surrounded by totally new people, trying to make friends, trying to be social, trying to go to the grocery store and figure everything out. So, like, that's before you're starting to even think about the physical execution and then also like being good and being in form.
I totally agree. And then you've got the added stress of being like the new kid in class and
Yeah.
introducing yourself and finding your place and establishing yourself in an already established team,
Yeah.
which just is another layer.
And there's also even like the element of like, oh, well, and I'm not even just saying this about Alyssa, this was true of me too. It's like, oh, you showed up here as an 8. Whose spot do you think you're taking? And then it's kind of like, oh my God, now not only do I have to like earn my spot, but like I'm upsetting somebody that means a lot to this team. So there was just like that social component of I'm gonna like step on some toes here if I want to play.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot that goes into it, Needy, and that's why I appreciate you asking. That was a really, really great question. So thank you so much for writing in. If anybody else has questions about anything, Becky and I are here for you. We're just here to answer them. So send us an email at womensgamemib@menandblazers.com. Okay, Becky. Sadly, we are nearing the end of the episode. This has been an episode where I just feel like we have explored so many topics and grown as people and podcasters. But before we let everybody go, I want to leave our listeners with a good vibe.
Okay. My good vibe is it's been a little slow for shows over the summer. And so I was kind of diving deep into the Netflix, you know,
Verse.
the verse to see what was available. And I looked up like Emmy nominated shows
Mm-hmm.
and America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders
Are you
was
into it?
Emmy nominated. And I was like, let me check this out. And I was hooked from the get. These women are unbelievable athletes. And I love the story because they like put in so much time and so much energy. They do all these like extra events aside from the football matches. They're training almost every single night. Almost all of them have 1, 2, 3 other jobs because they don't get paid as well as they should be for being
Yeah.
cheerleaders. And so I was just like so enraptured and enthralled by these stories. And the women are incredible and just like amazing athletes. And so I was like, this is such a vibe. And then I did like a couple deep dives into it. And they got like a 400% increase in their salary,
Yeah.
which is like awesome, but still like not quite where they probably deserve to be. But I was like, okay, they're taking the right steps. And I think having a show like this that just highlights and showcases their talent and their personalities and their stories, I think is only going to put more pressure on
Yeah.
Dallas to keep paying them better and better and better.
Totally. I mean, I think it definitely helped because I feel like the Dallas Cowboys were kind of getting called out after season 1 for the treatment. And I think they were like, oh,
Well.
but it's so incredible that these women like saw the power that they had. I watched both seasons too. It's been a few weeks, but I also really love it. It's also so fun to like watch. Like they're so incredibly talented and it's like
So talented.
fun to watch and also like gut-wrenching to watch, and stories like that are super cool. It kind of reminded me of the Cheer docuseries.
Yes. Yeah. Also
Where you're just
amazing.
like, "Oh my God, how are you guys doing this? It's so incredible." Okay, I love that as a good vibe. My good vibe. Everybody already knows I went to a wedding this past weekend, and so I want to shout out my parents who came to my house to dog sit, and they're coming back this weekend because believe it or not, Becky, I have another wedding this weekend.
Oh my God, you're just so popular. What's it like being you? Just being so beloved.
2 weddings, 2 weekends in a row.
Oh my, you're gonna have no voice
Do you
for
want
next
to do
week.
you want to hear something else?
Yes?
I have another one the weekend after.
Oh my
3
gosh.
weddings, 3 weekends in a row. But so my
Social
good
butterfly.
vibe, my it's those are my I think I have it's like absurd that they're 3 weekends in a row. Like it's like I didn't go to a wedding all summer until now. But anyways, so my good vibe is my parents because they came to dog sit and they're going to do it again this weekend, which is literally so nice of them. They did such a great job. 2 dogs, one of them is a puppy, and they just go for little walks and they send me lots of pictures, and I just feel really really grateful that my parents are just supporting my wedding habit.
You make it sound like it's a bad thing. Oh.
So yeah, shout out to my parents. Love you guys. Thank you so much. And the dogs love you too. All right, everybody. That's it for this week's episode of Good Vibes FC. Make sure you check out our interview with Morgan Gautrat on Thursday. Morgan just moved to Newcastle United. It was so fun for me to catch up with her. I've known Morgan since I was like 15 years old. So we spent so much time talking about our childhoods playing on the US youth national teams together. So check that out on Thursday. Also, please make sure you're following us across all social media and please join us on Discord. We're going to have lots of conversations in there. It's a really great place to meet other women's soccer fans and to have great conversations about everything that's going on. All right, everybody. I think that's it. Goodbye.
I'm Becky Sauerbrunn.
And I'm Sam Mewis. Love you guys.
Goodbye.